And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is Herr Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer, James Huff, making sure everything works just fine, broadcasting from the States. Greetings, gentlemen. Greetings, Jon.
Good evening. Good to be back.
Yeah, good to be back. I really do deeply apologize for not being able to be here last week, but there was just no way I would have been able to speak for more than 3 minutes without having to stop and blow my nose and then cough worse than Hillary and then speak some more. So yeah.
Yeah, at least we got a couple of videos in your YouTube channel out of it, so it's not all bad.
Yeah, but then again, even there, I had to edit the crap out of them. I mean, every single one of those represents an effort. But at least I got the option to edit as opposed to live streaming, where, yeah, no. The worst was the next day when I recorded the recorded podcast for the Romanian language channel, and that one contains like 30 brutal edits in the middle of the sentence because I was just having so many cough crises. So yeah. But anyway, now I'm much healthier than I was last week, and I'm very happy to be here. You said you've had better weather in the last several days.
Yeah, there's no snow anymore, and it's just generally a bit warmer. It's like slightly positive degrees here.
Yeah, that's great. Today there were like 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, but yesterday it went as high as 20. Uh, we were joking that if it keeps going like that, we will be having all the seasons in just 1 week. We didn't have autumn, but we had spring and deep summer. No, we didn't have summer, sorry, but we had spring and deep winter and autumn for sure in the same week. On Monday they were still -10. But still, I mean, it's getting better, and that's great because I'm sick and tired of this extreme cold because it brings huge bills for heating. So,
Yeah.
all right, okay, let's start. It seems like a long news section, but it's really not. But nevertheless, let's kick it off.
Okay, the first piece of news is from the Icelandic archives, or alternatively from the Independent. Teachers who avoid touching children are guilty of child abuse, experts claim. Teachers who avoid physical contact with children in the classroom are guilty of child abuse, experts have claimed. Members of the British Psychological Society, BPS, said teachers who do not touch children when they are happy, upset, or worried could in fact cause harm and hinder pupils' development. Quote, "What's missing is recognition of how important touch is," child psychologist Sean Cameron told CES, and that withholding touch is in itself a form of psychological abuse. Psychologists from the society have called on schools to change their attitudes towards physical contact with students, explaining to parents that touch is not only necessary, but an integral part of the teacher-pupil relationship. Professor Frances McClone, head of the of effective neuroscience at Liverpool John Moores University, said that physical contact with students is absolutely essential for children's brain development. Speaking at a British Psychological Society conference on touch in schools and children's services, he said denying physical contact was akin to denying a child oxygen. "I get very exercised by the demonization of touch," he said. "It's cruel in my mind. It's another form of abuse. The scientific evidence is incontrovertible. I'm not just talking a psycho-nonsense. I'm talking about proper evidence neuroscience." While physical contact between teachers and students is not illegal, the government advises schools to have a no-touch policy. Department for Education guidance states that while it is often necessary or desirable for a teacher to touch a child, for instance when dealing with accidents or teaching musical instruments, physical contact can easily be deemed inappropriate and unprofessional. At the BPS conference last week, former Prime Minister David Cameron said in his experience, many head teachers view touching a child as an unjustifiable risk. He said, "By discouraging touch, you're depriving a young person of a very humane reaction, but you're also setting up a situation where a young person can use this as a tool to put down or control a teacher. It's a double whammy, really." Mary Boustede, General Secretary of the Association of Teachers and Lecturers Teaching Union, said the union acknowledges that a humane relationship with pupils involves occasional physical contact, but she added that she would always advise teachers to be cautious. Don't put yourself in a dangerous situation, she said. Don't put yourself in a situation where a child can accuse you of inappropriate contact. Of course, children must be protected, but teachers also have a right not to have their career ruined by false accusations.
So damned if you do, damned if you don't?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think that denying a touch is like denying oxygen. I mean, that sounds like a bit of a...
That's like obvious hyperbole. I mean, if you don't have oxygen, you die within a couple of minutes. But you know, in the last couple of minutes, I haven't been touched by anyone. I'm still alive, so it can't be quite that bad.
Yeah, and I remember riding the train from one end of the country to the other. It took like 14 hours, and nobody touched me when I was like 9 or 10. Because my grandma was sleeping and I wasn't, because I don't sleep. And nobody touched me, and I'm still alive. So yeah, if I was able to survive 14 hours without being touched, that's probably not an issue. On a more serious note, the former prime minister is absolutely correct. I mean, it is a double whammy. Sure, it would be nice, but on the other hand, even children now know, because they have been endlessly propagandized with the idea that they should immediately announce an authority figure if they believe they've been inappropriately touched, which most of the times, let's face it, most of the times it's not true. Any head teacher can attest that if the head teacher were to take seriously all the guidelines, the head teacher would prosecute the teachers inside the school every day. I mean, it is up to a point, and this is not just in Britain, although Britain is by far the most extreme example. It is up to a point where the guidelines for quote unquote child protection have reached a full insanity point.
Yeah, and I mean, I really agree with what these people are saying from the psychological society. I mean, it's maybe a bit it's a bit exaggerated to say that it's that is as important as oxygen, but it is quite important, and it's kind of physical contact should not be demonized in the way it is, but given the reality of the situation, especially for male teachers, it is just advisable to never touch students unless you absolutely have to for some reason. Like if a student is having a medical emergency or something like that, and of course, but in a normal situation, you just better not touch anyone.
Yeah, unless you're, I don't know, teaching the student how to hold a violin or things like that. But yeah, otherwise, the safe policy for the individual teacher, is to abstain from touching. And that's sad. It really is sad. And I don't know if there is any way forward for this. I mean, other than trying to reverse the demonizations that have occurred in the last 20 to 30 years, I don't know if there is a way to reverse some of this, reverse the reluctancy of teachers. Probably fewer cases of falsely accused professors or teachers would be helpful, I guess.
Yeah, we can only hope for that.
Yeah, but it is an issue that I don't think can be solved within a year or within a decade. It will probably have to take a lot more. And yes, of course, I don't disagree with the folks from the British Psychological Society. They probably do have a point. I don't know if it's really 100% incontrovertible evidence neuroscience. Yeah, not really. But yeah, I can definitely empathize, and both children and adults can attest that sometimes a touch and the form of non-verbal communication can be much more effective than words.
Yep.
All right, let's go to the next one. Coming from staying in Britain, coming from Heat Street. Now this has been all over the news, but this one is written on a first-person narrative, and it just sounds better. Philip Davis: when I stood up for equality, the Parliament heckled and jeered. The House of Commons was packed for the impeding start of the debate on the Brexit bill. Even the Prime Minister had arrived early when my Conservative colleague Nusrat Ghani introduced her 10-minute rule bill. These are bills where, as the name suggests, an MP is given 10 minutes to seek permission to introduce a bill, and one other MP is given the right to speak for 10 minutes in opposition to it. Often they are unopposed at this very early stage in their life. Nusrat brought forward the bill to try to tackle the scourge of so-called honor-based crimes. She wanted to prohibit the term honor killing to pay for the reparation of bodies of UK citizens who are the victims of these crimes, and to allow the prosecution of someone in a third country by British courts when the victim is a UK citizen. You might think all of this is, on the face of it, worthy of support. So did I, until I noticed that these provisions only applied if the victim was a woman. If the victim was a man, then, as far as the bill was concerned, we shouldn't care. So I stood up in front of the packed house to say that I opposed the bill on the grounds that it discriminated against one gender and that the provisions should apply to all victims of honor crimes regardless of their gender. So what was the reaction of those MPs who are always the most sanctimonious when it comes to promoting gender equality? Did they welcome my stand for gender equality? No, they jeered and shouted me down. That's right, I was jeered and heckled for arguing that men and women should be treated equally. I always thought that was the equality agenda was all about, but clearly not. I pointed out that, according to official sources, around a quarter of all victims of honor-based violence were men, and argued that they should be just as important to us as female victims. One MP shouted out to me that Nusrat Ghani had mentioned male victims in her speech. Indeed, she had, but unfortunately she hadn't mentioned them where it mattered, in the bill. I had to tell them to look at the screens to see the title of her bill, which we were debated: Crime, Aggravated Murder, and Violence Against Women Bill, which clearly excludes men. But why? Why did it need to mention either gender in the title? Why could it not just apply to everyone equally? We don't have to separate crimes of male murder and female murder, we just have murder. Why not the same here? Of course, we should all oppose women suffering from honor-based violence, but surely we should equally oppose honor-based violence against men too. I had hoped that this would go without saying and be obvious. Not in the House of Commons, it seems. The most amazing part of this was the number of colleagues who came up to me afterwards to tell me that A, of course I was right in what I was saying, and B, that I was incredibly brave to have stood up and said it. I asked them all, why is it brave to stand up and argue that men and women should be treated equally? Answers on a postcard, please. I had no idea that Philip Davis is even aware that Heat Street exists, which is a countercultural, edgy website, let alone that Philip Davis would submit a column on Heat Street. Nevertheless, it is really good to see a member of the British Parliament writing in such a place. I mean, it really is. I guess he started learning about it after he spoke at AVFM's conference last year in London. He probably started following everything that MRAs are following, and obviously Heat Street is one of them. Nevertheless, I don't know what will happen with this bill. What I would just simply notice is that 4 or 5 years ago, the idea of hearing such thing in a parliament and then reading it about it in a viral article by the politician himself was just simply a pipe dream. At that time, there were only like 2 or 3 podcasts, including this one, in in I don't know, March or April 2013, and that was pretty much it. Now it's more or less getting closer to being mainstream culture, and that's great. I mean, every single one of us made it culturally acceptable to question these things.
Yeah, that's definitely a trend that has been going strong in the last couple of years, that we're gaining more and more mainstream acceptance. And oftentimes it's not actually people like discovering the men's rights movement or something, but it's just that these ideas are getting out there, and these ideas are quite reasonable. I mean, like, reasonable people who are not ideological feminists hear them, they say, yeah, it's sure, it should also include men. Why not? Because that's just reasonable and fair, and just the fact that we're able to expose more and more people to these arguments means that we're going to gain more and more ground.
Yeah, and one of the successful things that those of us in this corner of political incorrectness have done is that we never focused on personalities. We never tried to shove everyone to just, I don't know, like Paul Elam or or like myself or like anyone, any particular personality. We just kept on pushing the ideas, and that was pretty much it. If you don't like how Paul Elam phrases the ideas, fine, you phrase them. Uh, the,
Yep.
and that contributed to the success of the ideas that were more or less confined to this particular corner of the internet just less than half a decade ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's good to see Philip Davis becoming more active. I'm looking forward for the next meeting of the what is called Women and Equalities Committee, where Philip Davis is
Or
now a member.
maybe at some point if Philip Davis is away, just the Equality Committee, but I'm not necessarily holding my breath for that one.
Well, think about it this way: if he manages to stay a member of that committee for 2 or 3 or 4 years, at least 2 years, then there will be a way to introduce another non-feminist, another skeptic into that committee. And by the time of the next elections, maybe there will be 3 or 4 skeptics within that committee. And the entire committee is like 7 members or 8. So sooner or later, it could actually be a majority of skeptics within it and change its name.
Yep.
Again, it's as Andrew Breitbart used to say, politics is downstream from culture. We're changing the culture, and along with it, slowly, much slower than many of us would probably want, but slowly the politics will have to follow.
Hmm.
All right, staying for a little bit more in Britain and staying inside the Conservative Party, actually. Coming from the BBC, domestic violence, Theresa May to oversee a new law. Theresa May will directly oversee the creation of new laws to deal with domestic abuse in England and Wales, the government has said. Downing Street said current legislation lacked clarity and it was, quote, unacceptable, unquote, that some areas worked harder to tackle abuse than others. A new act would aim to address this inconsistency and make the law work better for victims. Labour said success depended on funding for policing and support victims. Mrs. May said it was an issue she had always she had always attached a personal importance to, which that should spell bad news because Theresa May is one of the few feminists in the Conservative Party. Anyway, domestic violence and abuse is a life-threatening, life-shattering, and absolutely abhorrent crime, she said. There are thousands of people who are suffering at the hands of abusers, often isolated and unaware of the options and support available to them to end it. It is unclear what shape the Domestic Violence and Abuse Act might take, but the government is consulting with experts who work with victims of abuse. Their ideas and suggestions will help shape the new law. Diana Barron, chief executive of anti-abuse charity Safe Lives, said she would like to see legislation simplified and consolidated. She said the police's inconsistent response was partly down to cultural blocks. Officers did not always take reports seriously and had to deal with a large number of cases. Victims Commissioner Baroness Newlove, who also backed the plan, said she wanted to make sure victims had confidence to come forward to report abuse. She said she knew of police interviews that had taken place in the home of the victim and perpetrator, meaning the victim was too scared to speak. During her 6 years as Home Secretary, Mrs. May introduced domestic violence protection orders and a new offense against controlling and coercive behavior. Yeah, that was a failure, by the way. Domestic violence prosecutions and convictions have started to rise in recent years, and the Prime Minister said no stone will be left unturned in delivering a system that increases convictions and works better for victims, close quote. Anti-abuse charities, including Women's Aid, the NSPCC, and Refuge, welcomed the news, with one saying the laws around domestic abuse needed to be clearer. Mark Brooks, chairman of the Mankind Initiative charity, called for a real step change in supporting and recognizing male victims of domestic violence, saying they made up to a third of all victims. And then there's a little bit more whining from the Labour Party. Um, to be fair, this is a very good article by the BBC. I mean, it shows no bias whatsoever. And more to the point, it is indeed true when the BBC says it is unclear what shape the new act might take. Because when it comes to Theresa May, when she drafts policy, you have a 50% chance of getting something incredibly retarded and the 50% chances of getting something really, really groundbreaking and good. So, yeah, it is unclear. which one will be getting today. I mean, we should be having a jingle like Ben Shapiro has on his podcast. Good May, bad May. Which one will be getting today? Because there's really no way of knowing it. With that said, in previous attempts to modify this particular piece of legislation, there were no one from charities like Mankind or even Safe Lives, which Safe Lives, as opposed to Refuge and Women's Aid, Safe Lives is not a sex-specific charity, which is great. So there is at least one neutral charity involved, and the Mankind Initiative charity, which we know they're very good people and doing very good work for male victims of domestic violence. So there is some progress there, as opposed to all the other previous attempts to modify it when there was only feminists talking with other feminists.
Yeah, that is definitely some rays of light there. I'm kind of worried about some of the language here that or is it that no stone will be left unturned in delivering a system that increases convictions? That sounds quite worrying.
It does, and it sounds even more worrying when you think about it that Mrs. May is also behind the so-called extremist disruption orders, which essentially ended up being policies used by the government to prosecute, eco-Marxist hippies talking about taking down capitalism in their basements and things like that. I mean, she wants to propose as a law and order hardliner, but instead of being some sort of a Rudy Giuliani type of politician, she ends up being more like I don't know. More like the former mayor of Paris, who was not so efficient in tackling real crime, but was tackling parking tickets much better than the previous one. So that's why it is worrying, because if she will take the same approach here, she'll probably end up prosecuting more people who scream at each other in their own houses, whereas the real victims of abuse will still remain more or less ignored.
Yeah.
But still, as I was saying, when it comes to Theresa May, not just in terms of sexual politics, but policy in general, you have a 50% chance of getting something great and 50% chance of getting something that makes you face desk repeatedly.
Yeah, let's see how it turns out.
Yeah, maybe we're lucky this time. I don't know. I mean, or maybe, I mean, we'll see. It depends on how she takes care of Brexit. If she takes care of Brexit in a responsible way, then this means the domestic violence policy will be a disaster. If she fails at Brexit, then the domestic violence policy has a bigger chance of being not a disaster. Yeah. But still, I mean, considering that this is the politician that she was always more or less the token feminist in the Conservative Party, and this is also the politician that gave everyone the extremist disruption orders, which ended up being a complete disaster, and also the orders of controlling and coercive behavior, which were an utter failure. I say we shouldn't be getting our hopes too high. But nevertheless, considering that among the experts, quote unquote experts, who are advising for this policy, there are also people who are definitely not insane ideological feminists. At least we have some quite of a minuscule reason not to be completely horrified.
Yeah, I mean, it might actually be something positive, but let's wait and see.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving a little bit to the west, to the neighbor of the United Kingdom, and into the topic of free speech, coming from Politico, Ireland to get social media watchdog. The Irish government is finalizing plans to create an independent watchdog authority responsible for keeping social media platforms accountable for online abuse. Minister for Communications, Denis Naughton, will meet with ministerial colleagues next week to discuss the establishment of a new watchdog to monitor social media like Facebook and Twitter in their efforts to remove abusive content, bullying, and harassment, the Irish Independent reported Tuesday. The watchdog would be called the Digital Safety Commissioner and would produce a code of conduct for platforms to remove abusive content. The minister proposing the plan suffered from online abuse by internet trolls when he had a bicycle accident early January, the paper reported. The European Commission is considering drafting guidelines for internet platforms on how best to flag and remove abusive or illegal content. The measures, which likely won't be legally binding, could be released as soon as this spring. So, is our show getting illegal in Ireland? I mean, for those of you who are newer listeners, our show is technically illegal in Belgium. So we're already getting accustomed to having this show somewhat illegal in some countries. So, yeah, Belgium, and Ireland, same difference. Now, in a more serious note, how the hell do they intend to enforce this? And this is relevant for our audience too. I mean, at the end of the day, usually what online abuse means for progressives, it's usually normal talk for normal people, and usually non-feminist content tends to be flagged as online abuse quite frequently. So. We can afford to
Yeah,
laugh
because I mean,
we're
if you're disagreeing with their obviously correct opinions, and obviously it's abusive.
And we can afford to laugh because we're not in Ireland and we're on YouTube, and the opinion of a minister for communications in Ireland is completely irrelevant for us. But nevertheless, this kind of disease and this impulse of governments to try to censor things on social media is slowly spreading. Not so fast as many would have hoped, but still faster than what I would have liked, which is to say, none at all. This kind of disease, it tends to spread, and it is worrying a little bit. I'm not entirely worried. I mean, I can definitely sleep well tonight, but I'm a little bit worried of this trend.
Yeah, and I mean, you've also seen this sort of thing in Germany. There's efforts to establish some kind of thing like that here too, and I guess something that we're going to see quite a lot of over the next couple of years. But I mean, ultimately, people just need to grow a thicker skin. If people are mean to you on the internet, you just turn the internet off. Simple as that.
It still reminds me of that 2012 tweet. I don't know if you remember. It's the most retweeted tweet on Twitter. It was nigga, what are you talking about? Cyber violence doesn't exist. Just turn off the internet. Ha ha ha. I don't remember who. It was as a guy. I think he was a rapper, or anyway, a black guy who tweeted it, and it's still to this day the most retweeted, like 1 million retweets or something like that. But in all seriousness, there is such thing as the block button. There is such thing as the mute button. There is such thing as the X in the corner of your window. It's still X in Linux and Mac OS X. So, except on Mac, it's on the other end of the window. But nevertheless, I mean, just shut down the conversation if you don't like it.
Is it no longer an X in Windows? I still use Windows 7. I don't know.
No, it still is. No, I was talking on Mac OS X. It's still X, but it's on the other end of the window. It's
okay.
It's not on the upper right. It's on the upper left. But still, I mean, there is such thing as closing the window if you don't like what you're reading. There is no such thing as an obligation to read or to have internet conversations with people you don't like.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't like internet comments, just don't read them. It just, I mean, in a lot of websites nowadays, you actually have to click an extra button to open up the comments. You just don't click that button, and like other websites, you just like don't scroll down after the article or video or whatever, and you're never going to see those internet trolls.
Not to mention, many outlets are closing down their comment sections altogether, which is sad and disappointing. But nevertheless, I mean, the worst is the fact that there is a government trying to impose this. I mean, it's bad enough when Twitter has its own safety council, which is basically a feminist gathering, and the few members there that are not feminists are communists, and those are the chaps and the gals who get to decide what stays on Twitter and what doesn't. It's bad enough when Twitter does this. It's bad enough when Facebook does this. But when the government comes in and tries to do this, then it's a whole different ballgame. It's a much more dangerous game. because then it comes to questions like what is social media under the law. I mean, yeah, sure, Facebook is social media, but is, I don't know, sockfreespeech.com, which is a Reddit spin-off that belongs to AVFM, is that social media? If yes, then how are you going to force sockfreespeech.com to apply Irish law? I mean, it is this thing that, and I don't know, I'm not sure whether this politician that proposes this is just stupid, or he just hopes that he'll be able to bully some of the companies because they tend to have their headquarters in Ireland for tax purposes, because Ireland has much more sensible tax laws than most of the European Union. Uh, I don't know. Does he hope to bully some of those companies because they have their HQ, their European HQ there? Because most of the time, these kinds of laws come from politicians that simply don't understand internet, let alone basic economics, but internet in particular.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe it is actually easier to enforce this sort of thing in Ireland and in other countries because of so many companies being in Ireland, having their headquarters there. I mean, they're never going to be able to enforce that on some of these like smaller places. But if it's like Facebook or Twitter or something, they can't fly under the radar. That's not. These kind of companies may have more influence and so on, but they're also, just because they're so big, they actually have to comply with laws, because there's just no way they can just fly under the radar and just evade any sort of accountability that way.
Well, it depends where or if they have an HQ. I mean, Twitter, for instance, doesn't have an HQ in Europe at all, and definitely not in Ireland. Or if they do, it's not in Ireland. I checked whether there is such thing in Ireland. It isn't. There is one of Facebook and one of Google, but Twitter doesn't have an HQ in Ireland. So how will the Irish government punish Twitter for, I don't know, whatever, allowing something that their safety council deems unsafe? How?
Well, they can block Irish people from using Twitter. I mean, yes, you can get around it with uh, but I mean, most people are not
No, I was
tech
talking
savvy enough to.
realistically. No, you're right, but I was talking realistically. I mean, blocking the entire country from Twitter because there are two tweets that the government finds offensive. Yeah, that sounds something like Recep Erdogan would do in Turkey, but not something that
Yeah, okay.
necessarily.
Realistically, of course, they could slap some sort of fine on Twitter, and sort of it at the back of the mind is have this threat of blocking the country from Twitter as sort of their nuclear option.
Again, how we're going to, fines have to be enforced. How will you enforce it? Twitter is not an Irish citizen or a European citizen.
By threatening them to cut them off from Ireland if they don't comply.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, and considering that the CEO of Twitter is an absolute cuck, it kind of makes sense, I guess. I mean, that guy would believe literally anything if it contains abuse and whatnot. If you tell him that a tweet containing a fly is abusive, he'll delete it because, yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, too bad that Twitter is a good example legally, but it's not a good example morally because it's led by stupid people. As a result of which their stock prices keep on dropping for the last 5 years. It's a consistent trend. It's still a question whether Twitter will still be around by the end of this decade. Probably not, considering how their economic output tends to work. But still, I mean, how do we counteract this instinct? There has to be a way to counteract this instinct that seems to be seeping into some countries' governments in Europe. Not all of them. I mean, Sweden is backing down from its censorship, which is fantastic. I mean, there is the reverse trend too. But how do we counteract this particular type of instinct?
I don't really know. It's something that I don't think I have a lot of insight, because it's just such an alien way of thinking to me. Like the idea that you have to block lots of people because they say mean things, and you have to have the government step in there. That just seems so outrageous to me that I can't really like. It's just hard for me to like form a consistent mental model of someone who thinks that way. Uh, but I mean, on the other hand, that there's like lots of people around me here in Germany who do think that way. Who think that it's just horrible and something must be done about online harassment and so on. Um, I don't really know how we get to these people.
All right, I guess it's homework for me to try to think about it. But no, seriously, there has to be some way of framing the narrative uh, to counteract this on the cultural level. So as for the next several election cycles, I don't know, one or two, definitely not today, not to change it today or the next year. That's definitely impossible. But as a longer term project for like 4 years or 10 years. There has to be a way to frame an alternative narrative and push it into the mainstream that censorship is wrong. I mean, it really is wrong. Government censorship is wrong.
Maybe you could just to try to appeal people to say to them, imagine what happens when someone like say Donald Trump um, gets the power to censor what you're allowed to say on Facebook. What if he or someone like him gets to decide which posts are offensive? Would you be okay with that? Maybe that's one way of appealing to them, but I don't really know if that's going to work.
It could work. I mean, look at the Democrats in the States. They're suddenly discovering the Constitution. They're suddenly discovering states' rights. They're suddenly discovering subsidiarity and federalism. I mean, it could work.
Yeah, but the problem is that they're going to forget about that the moment they get back into the White House.
Yes.
Just like
it's not consistent. Yes.
Just like in America, the Republican Party is the party of small government and limiting spending and so on. Whenever they're not in the White House, when they're in the White House, they become the party of big government, and they don't see any problem with extending executive power and so on. That's it just changes on an 8-year basis based on election results.
Yeah, but what I had in mind more was not necessarily changing politicians. That definitely takes longer, unless we start getting into politics en masse, which is a messy business to begin with. But what I was thinking, what I was having more in mind is changing people, individuals, on the grassroots, rather than changing the minds of politicians. Because after all, politicians do change their mind depending on their surrounding culture. Most politicians are finger in the wind politicians. If they sense that the wind is blowing from a direction, they'll definitely adopt that particular direction. And we've seen this with many high-profile politicians who suddenly became pro the very thing that they hated for the previous 20 years, if the cultural wind had shifted. I mean, I could definitely see this particular minister 10 years from now saying that government censorship is wrong if most of his constituency believes that government censorship is wrong.
Yep.
So yeah, I was having more in mind like that, how to change people on the grassroots rather than how to change the minds of politicians. The minds of politicians change very hard. You either have to pay them or to force them. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the minds of ordinary people are also, I think, change based on election results. Whether it's their guy in power or their the enemy. That's. I mean, it's maybe not as extreme for the average person as for the politicians, but still, I think most people don't really have this sort of consistent principles about free speech. They're more they're outraged when their people don't get to speak out. But if it's the other people who have the wrong opinions and they can't state their wrong and harmful opinions anymore, that's all right. That's all right.
I don't know if this is necessarily true on this continent. It's definitely true in the United States. I can definitely agree with that. But in Europe, we still have this multi-party thingy, which tends to force more people to be a little bit less partisan And also that it is a lot less known in Europe to see your average Joe saying, "Oh, it's my guy uh, the prime minister now, so whatever he says, it's good." It's less likely to happen uh, because being more than two parties, most of the time there's usually three or four big parties in every country of Europe. There's a little bit less partisanship. Of course, partisanship exists in a tribalistic form like this, but it's not that pronounced as it tends to be in two-party systems.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Mhm. All right, let's go to the next one. The next one is really funny. Coming from the Daily Mirror, um, Pamela Anderson will campaign for men falsely accused of rape because of Julian Assange friendship. Pamela Anderson has revealed she wants to start campaigning for men who have been falsely accused of rape. The former Baywatch actress and glamour model is now an activist, and she has criticized Sweden for its almost paralyzing laws against sexual crimes. Speaking on RT's Going Underground, she said, quote, "Sweden has these very progressive laws against sexual crimes, whatever you want to call it. It's almost too progressive. It's almost paralyzing. I'm going to actually start campaigning for men who have been victims of being accused of rape when they haven't actually done anything." The star, who has previously campaigned for women's rights and against domestic violence, insisted that Sweden as a nation doesn't really know what to do. She added, quote, "We all, of course, gravitate towards vulnerable people, and we consider that to be women and children first and foremost, which is important, but there's also a lot of men who are in a vulnerable situation," close quote. Pamela has defended her close friend and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who has been in Ecuador's London embassy since June 2012 to avoid extradition over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. She claimed, "When you read the actual case and you read everything about it, there's no crime that's been committed." Pamela recently revealed she likes bringing style and glamour to Julian and his adoptive home, where he's been since claiming political asylum almost 5 years ago. She said recently, "He's living in dire circumstances, so I like to bring a little help and a smile and some glamour. It's so rare that he has someone to come and visit him and bring him things, and I want to be able to do that for him." However, she stopped short of confirming any romance between the two of them, adding, "It's difficult to talk about when you're under surveillance. But he's a great guy. I don't want to say anything about whether there's a romance, so let's just say they're good. Let's just say we're just good friends," close quote. Now, quite frankly, I don't care if she fucks Julian Assange or not. Uh, what I do care more is that even though she's a more of a has-been, passe cultural pop culture figure, nevertheless, a pop culture figure speaking on these things. That's a win on my corner.
Yeah, a huge win.
I mean, it's not a win bigly. It would have been great to have a more
It's
current.
big. It's big, but not huge.
Yeah, it's big but not huge. I would have preferred to have a more current pop culture figure, but nevertheless, it's still better than it was 5 years ago. Uh, it's interesting that all of the I wouldn't call them theories, but rather hypotheses that we kept on ping ponging around 2, 3, or 4 years ago. They're now starting to slowly be confirmed. If you remember, 3 years ago, we were theorizing that pop culture figures, and especially women, will not give a shit about these things unless they perceive it to be somehow affecting them personally. This is particularly true in this case. I mean, at the end of the day, she started giving a shit about this because her quote unquote close friend is affected by it.
Yeah. I mean,
Otherwise,
that's often how it goes.
I don't know. I mean, I was never affected by pretty much none of the issues I talk about.
Yeah, I mean that's true. That's also the case for me. But I think still quite a lot of people are brought into this kind of movement because they either experience something personally or someone who's close to them experienced one of these issues.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I also think it's fair to say that it's especially true of women to come into
Hmm.
this movement.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there are very few women who haven't been affected by these things and are still around. I think Karen is one good example, but most of the time it is true. Nevertheless, it's a good win. I really hope Pamela Anderson gets to make, I don't know, a PSA or something that ends up a little semi viral. That would be fantastic. That would
Yep.
drive more people. Nevertheless, there are quite a few feminists that are already very upset with Pamela Anderson's newfound cause. I forgot to save the link, goddammit, it, but it was on the Elite Daily, which is a far left, far feminist publication, which published a very incoherent rant against Pamela Anderson to the tune of "How dare she!" It's interesting to watch this particular conflict. I mean, the feminists are having they keep on having with every particular high profile woman. They tend to have a meltdown whenever they dare to step off the reservation.
So I have a question. So feminists have taught me that women never lie about rape. They never lie when they're talking about rape. But here is Pamela Anderson, who's a woman who's talking about rape, saying that women lie about rape. Who do I believe now? That's a contradiction, right?
Well, in fairness, the Elite Daily rant does acknowledge that sometimes women do lie about rape, but it's interesting to see how their speech has moved. 5 years ago, it was women never lie about rape. The MRAs are insane. In the current year, well, yeah, women sometimes do lie about rape, but it's 2 to 8% of the time, not 40%, as the MRAs are saying. The 2 to 8% is the result of many feminist studies trying to adapt to the new reality. The reality being that now everyone knows that everyone knows that everyone knows that women sometimes lie about rape. So now they're trying to trot out that particular stat. And the answer from the non-feminist sector is like, who cares? Okay, it's 2%. It's not 30. Okay, that still doesn't change the fact that sometimes women do lie about rape. And they kind of painted themselves into a corner. I mean, when they were saying that this never happens, they were looking extremely devoid from reality. Now they're saying, oh yes, it does happen, but it doesn't happen that often. In the Elite Daily article, damn it, I hate it that I haven't saved the link. They're saying that, oh well, the false rape charges happened in 2 to 8% of the cases, so the chances of Assange being innocent aren't particularly in his favor, which is a very, very wrong way of reading statistics. But then again, if they knew how to read statistics, they wouldn't be feminists. Mm, I don't know what they'll do next. So at the very least, now they acknowledge that sometimes women do lie about rape. I guess that's progress too.
Yeah, I think it matters a lot whether it's 2% or 40%. If it's 2%, then it would indeed make sense to say that therefore therefore there's a very high chance that someone who's accused of rape actually is a rapist. But if it's 40%, then who knows?
Mm.
But I mean, of course, these 2 to 8% figures, they're not it's not actually an accurate figure, because that's the figure of cases where it's proven that they lied about rape. There's lots of cases where you just don't know either way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's also the cases where the 2 to 8% figure doesn't include the cases where it's a mistaken. It's a mistaken identification. The 2 to 8% cases are the cases where rape just never happened. Period.
Yep.
And it was just a lie from one end to the other. It doesn't include the cases where rape did happen. It's just that the perpetrator was either purposefully or unintentionally identified as being the wrong perpetrator. So there are many other cases that can definitely be considered and classified as false rape charges, which they simply do not enter into that particular categorization that turned out the 2 to 8% number. And of course, the 2 to 8% number applies to the United States. I mean, Assange was charged in Sweden, and every country has a very different rate. And in India, it's even worse. I mean, there is that particular study which is now forbidden to post on Facebook. They say it's an abusive link, and you risk your. Seriously, I'm not joking. One time I had my account suspended for a month No, sorry, for a week for posting that particular link. When I wanted to post it, said it's an abusive link. Are you sure you want to post it? And I was, yes.
Abusive link.
Yes, it's an article from Times of India, very, very mainstream source. It's not some obscure fascist blog or something. It's a very mainstream source, which shows a DNA study conducted over like 3 years, which discovered that in the Delhi area, which is allegedly the rape capital of the world, it's not, but that's what the press used to say a few years ago. And it showed that 55% of the cases there had incontrovertible DNA evidence that they were false. that didn't happen. That kind of toned down the feminist speech quite a lot in India. I mean, when that study came out, they started toning down the whole rhetoric because it was like, okay, well, I guess we can't really lie that bigly. But anyway, that particular study is now forbidden to post on Facebook unless you want your account suspended, which I had. So yeah, I mean, the 2 to 8% number applies to one particular study for the United States. It doesn't apply to anything and everything under the sun all over the world. I mean, that's what that's another thing that feminists don't seem to understand. They think that a particular study somewhere just applies everywhere. Well, it's not exactly true.
Aren't humans just interchangeable atoms that are just the same everywhere?
Yeah, no. Yeah, and also not only do these studies don't apply anywhere, but besides the fact that women are not equal to other women, it's also the laws are not equal. I mean, there are far more cultural and legal incentives for women to falsely accuse men of rape in India or in Sweden than there are, let's say, in Italy, where you don't get compensation from the government because you were quote unquote raped. And if it turns out that you were bullshitting, you don't have to pay the shekels back. That's the policy in Britain and in Sweden. And they're talking about introducing it in India too. So when you have these kinds of policies, there's a different system of incentives. So I think it does tend to reason. I don't think it is unreasonable or extremist to say that it does tend to reason that there will be more incentives to file false rape allegations.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually pay people for making false accusations, then of course people are going to make more false allegations than they would otherwise.
Yeah, it's just not. But I don't know. I guess it's extremist to say this.
You don't need a PhD in economics to understand that.
Oh yeah. I love it when I make points about economics. They were like, "What's your do you have a degree in economics?" And I'm like, "No, you don't need a PhD in economics to understand the incentives." And you just don't. Yeah. All right. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is from the Bayerische Rundfunk. She can stay, he has to go. Quote, I'm a woman and my brother is a man. That is why her brother is being deported and she is not, says Lina. She and her twin brother are 19 years old. They grew up with their parents in Afghanistan in the Afghan city of Mazar-i-Sharif until the Taliban or other terrorists wanted her. Lina, the family's oldest daughter, as a wife. Her father was threatened by terrorists and her brother was mugged in broad daylight. Because he feared for his children, her father decided to flee with his family. 2 years ago, they arrived in Germany. In the meantime, Saba has found a job as a cleaner and can support himself. Lina is taking German classes with the Kolpingwerk, which is a Catholic organization that's based in Germany. After that, the former law student wants to do an apprenticeship to become a saleswoman, just like her brother, who was a salesman in Afghanistan. But now the sudden turning point. Her brother Saba receives a letter telling him he will be deported. Among other things, the letter says he would not have to fear any individual threat to his life and health in his native Afghanistan. Not only do many organizations and local observers believe that the north of Afghanistan to be anything but safe, the family fled because the Taliban threatened to kill all their children. And a small boy among their relatives already had to pay with his life. Skipping a bit here. Indeed, the difference between man and woman seems to play a decisive role, as the Federal Ministry for Migration and Refugees confirmed. They believe that life in Afghanistan is tolerable for young men, and giving the rest also. So, this I found is
Not surprised.
yeah, not particularly surprised. That's it's a very interesting case of how some of the assumptions we have about gender roles in the Muslim world shape our public policy.
Not only that, but let me tell you, let me be progressive here and say, as an extreme right-wing, anti-immigrationist, Islamophobe, white cishet shitlord, I have to say that some of my fellow extremist right-wing, Islamophobe, white cis shitlords have made a tremendous mistake in promoting the narrative. Yeah, well, let the women in, kick the young men out. No, I'm for kicking everyone out. Uh, I hate everyone equally. But on a more serious note, this sounds like a case where none of them should be deported. I mean, they found a job. They're trying to support themselves. They're learning German. They're trying to integrate. Uh, they probably shouldn't be deported. Period. There are many other cases, and I can point to concrete cases. I've seen some of them in the Hungarian media, where deportation is probably the best option, regardless of sex, but not in this particular case. I mean, if I were an immigration officer, I would probably keep these ones under observation, but I wouldn't deport them, um, because there is no reason to. They haven't committed any crime, at least that we know of, and they're, unlike many other cases, not just in Germany, they're making efforts to integrate into society. So why kick them out?
Yeah, I think this story reveals some of the glaring flaws in the German asylum policy. So one of the problems is that these cases take a very long time to decide. It's something like half a year on average before it is decided whether someone gets to stay or will be deported.
Half a year. That's good. In Canada, it takes 2 years.
Wow, that's even more insane. But during this half year, they can't actually find any sort of they can't take any sort of normal job. They're basically forced to live off welfare for that time, and it's that's just enormously detrimental to any sort of effort of integrating these refugees into German society. Because if you spend all your time in some sort of some sort of home for asylum seekers, surrounded by others from Afghanistan and wherever else, and you don't go to any sort of job, you maybe you're taking some sort of German class or something like that, but I can guarantee you're going to learn more German by just having a regular job where you're surrounded by Germans every day than
Yes.
taking some sort of course 3 times a week. And also
Yeah.
just
Go ahead, please.
once you've lived on welfare for a couple of months, it's a lot harder to then go into the German job market than if you just started working right from the start. Then, of course, that's also what makes it even harder is the minimum wage law, which was recently introduced in Germany, like 1.5 years ago. It's just we have a minimum wage of €8.50. It's just if someone is I don't know a goat herder from the plains of Afghanistan who isn't particularly literate in his own language and doesn't speak a word of German, he's not going to be worth €8.50 to any German employer.
Yes.
That's just the reality. But
Yeah.
they might employ him for like €3 or €5,
Yeah.
and once you get a foot in the door, you can work your way up. But if you just forced to rely on welfare from the start, then you're probably never going to make it.
Totally.
And then there's like huge unemployment numbers among refugees
quote unquote refugees. Yeah.
because of these reasons.
Hmm.
And even though we have this really lengthy process where every case is sort of investigated, we're still get a crap like this. We still get someone who really shouldn't be deported being deported, and it's just it's just really counterproductive. I think it's also a problem that we have um, this sort of asylum policy is sort of designed to be entirely altruistic or something like that. That's just about assessing need and assessing whether someone is actually a refugee or one of these um, evil economic migrants. Personally, I don't really care if someone is an economic migrant. What I care is this person capable of being a productive member of German society? Then it's fine, and then you can come in as long as he's not like a criminal or something. But if you're not willing to integrate yourself, if you don't, if you're not willing to work, if you're a criminal, then you should be deported. It doesn't really matter if your home country is particularly safe or not.
Yeah.
In my view.
Mhm. Yeah, this is a flaw that exists, that it used to exist all over Europe. Now slowly certain countries started changing it. My own country changed it, Denmark changed it, Hungary changed it, but the model you're describing used to be uniform across Europe until basically until the migrant crisis. The migrant crisis changed everything for many countries. But Germany and Sweden, they still do insist on this particular model that you described to be as altruistic. I would describe it in much harsher terms. Because it is detrimental to the taxpayers, to the German taxpayers in this particular case, and it's also detrimental to the immigrant himself or herself. I mean, you're literally forcing them to be on the government dole, which I presume for the lazy amongst them, that's fantastic. But for the less lazy amongst them, such as these particular two individuals described in the article, it's probably a hindrance. Not probably, it's definitely a hindrance. Uh, I understand that, okay, it takes 6 months to process the asylum seeking request or
And it
whatever.
really shouldn't take 6 months. It should take a week or something at max, like in a typical case. Like, what
Yeah,
is
but
there actually to think about? It's like
considering they have many of them, there's many requests, unusually many requests compared to, let's say, 2013. So I can understand why it takes more. Okay, 6 months is definitely a bit too much. It takes like 4 weeks here in Romania, but then again, there are much fewer requests than.
and I mean,
Uh,
it's not like there's some sort of detailed examination of what happens in each case or something. That it's mostly just you're from this particular area of Afghanistan, which you've designated as being safe enough for men, and back you go. That's it.
yeah.
Uh, it just seems like it just shouldn't take long at all if
Mhm.
that's all they're going to do. They obviously did not look into this particular case in any great detail.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they
Mhm.
wouldn't hand out these kinds of seemingly arbitrary decisions. That yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's just
as far as I know, there is an appealing process, which I presume these
yeah, there's
individuals
an
will
appeals process.
use.
It's also in the part of the article that I cut out that they're talking about that he will appeal to this
Mhm.
this is deportation, but the chances of that actually going through are very minuscule.
I see. Uh, yeah, I mean, when you have this particular type of situation, which, let's face it, it's an extraordinary type of situation where you have a million something or even more of that immigrants coming just within a few months. You're going to have fuck ups like this. It's just a state bureaucracy. Expecting perfection from them is a bit unreasonable. Uh, Nevertheless, as a rule, probably Germany should take a look across the border in Denmark and see what the Danes are doing. Namely, look, you're going to start working effective immediately, and then we'll see what we can do. Uh, Maybe a bit of a paradigm shift in this regard could help speed things up. because once considering that it takes that long, once there are many individuals who are already working and they've already making some sort of progress, it's going to be also a lot easier to appeal against these bureaucracies. It's going to be a whole different ballgame. Whereas now, probably this case ends up in the newspaper because it's very rare. And I don't think it is the case for most quote unquote refugees to be in this particular situation.
What exactly do you mean in this particular situation?
Namely, that one of them is working and the other one is
Okay,
on time with the German courses. And I don't think this is the norm. I think it's rather the exception, which is why I said that this particular case should have been decided the other way around.
yeah.
So yeah, it's going to always be complicated when you have so many people arriving at just one moment or on a very short period of time. It's going to be fuck ups like these. As for the quote unquote safe area for young men versus safe area for young women, yeah, give me a fucking break. There is no war in Afghanistan. If safety is if the deciding factor, then they should deport them, both of them. Because yeah, no, it's not Syria, for crying out loud. There is no war in and unless you're in the area where they still have that particular what's it called again, the Baka-Bazi, although they are too old for Baka-Bazi also. So yeah, no, Afghanistan is safe for young Afghanis. So if safety um, is the only concern, then they should deport them both. If safety is not the only concern, then this bullshit that we're gonna deport him but not her because Afghanistan, that area is safe for him but not for her, yeah, that's nonsense.
And I mean, I would just eventually guess that there are very, very few areas in the world which are actually safer for men than for women.
I find it hard to think of one.
Yeah, I don't know either, but maybe there are some, but
Yeah, I don't know which one, because in war zones, women have if it's an African war zone, yeah, women have a slightly bigger chance, but not by much, of being raped, but men have a slightly bigger chance of being impaled or killed or tortured and then killed. So
yeah,
it's definitely
much
not.
bigger chance of being killed.
Yeah, so I don't know. I find it hard to think of one.
Yep.
Maybe there is, but it's almost like an assumption. Yeah, maybe they exist. Yeah, you sure? All right, let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is from Legal Tribune Online. Affirmative action for women in North Rhine-Westphalia unconstitutional. Since mid-2016, female civil servants in North Rhine-Westphalia have been promoted preferentially in cases of equal suitability and performance. The Higher Administrative Court of North Rhine-Westphalia has now decided that this violates the principle of selecting the best applicant and is therefore unconstitutional. Skipping a bit of legal babble, promotion decisions have to be solely based on criteria that directly concern the applicant's suitability, qualification, and domain-related abilities. In the court's view, this did not include the aspect of women's advancement. Skipping another bit here, the court is of the opinion that the constitutional mandate of implementing substantial equality for women in accordance with Article 3, Paragraph 2, second sentence of the Grundgesetz, that's the German constitution, could be fulfilled while maintaining the principle of selecting the best applicant. Men's head start when it comes to pensions was often the result of uninterrupted employment. This difference could be mitigated or compensated if attributes such as talent, general knowledge, life experience, and personality would be weighted more strongly in evaluations. This might also achieve that those women in particular would be promoted who actually face a double burden at work and at home. Affirmative action solely based on sex would neglect this aspect without legal cause. And skipping the rest once again. As you can see, I've cut most of the stuff from this article.
Yeah,
This is very long and quite technical.
Yeah, usually when I read articles in German from you, I'm able to understand like half of it without a dictionary, but not in this case. In this case, I have to admit I don't understand more than maybe 10%. I was able to locate the sentences you've kept, which are the only humane sentences. The article, it's amazingly technically written, which I guess it makes sense. I mean, it's the legal tribune online. It's not.
Yeah, it's not necessarily for the general public.
Yeah, it's for lawyers, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot more. I guess progress. I mean, it
Yeah,
kind of, on the
it's
face of it, on the face of it, it sounds like a good decision.
yeah, it's definitely a good decision. It's just like on the last paragraph I read, you can sort of see that they're not opposed to affirmative action in general. They just say basically that this way of advantaging women is not constitutional, but they've just basically like given them basically some suggestions of how they can actually still increase women's representation while still being constitutional. So focusing on the more of these sort of soft factors of an assessment of a person's talent and general knowledge and life experience, whatever that means, would be a way of getting more women into these higher positions. So from that standpoint, it's not like a huge win, but it is a win.
No, it sounds to me that the judges are expressing, they always have to provide, and I'm sure this is the case in Germany too, they have to provide those motivation of the court, where the judges express basically opinions. And in this case, it does seem to me that the judges are acting like Antonin Scalia used to act where he would say, I absolutely do agree with the plaintiff, but I'm not here to express opinions. The law is this, therefore the plaintiff is wrong. So it seems to me that this is the case. This is the feeling that the judges have. They do agree that favoring women over men is a good thing because potato, but the law is what it is, and therefore it's not constitutional. But you could try doing it like this, which may or may not be constitutional, but it's definitely easier to implement from a legal standpoint. That's the gist that I get from the attitudes of the judges.
Yeah, definitely. That seems to be
although admittedly the
attitude.
life experience thingy sounds very, very vague. I mean, it could mean literally anything.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, at least they try. All right. Oh shit. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is quite funny. This is from the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Antifa and Bastards. The AStA, the Allgemeiner Studierendenausschuss, which is kind of executive body of student government in a lot of German universities. So the AStA newspaper of Frankfurt University investigates the question of whether leftists should say that all cops are bastards. The answer is no, but for reasons other than the one you might suppose. And as exercise to reader before I continue reading, try to think of why they find that objectionable. Okay, so why is it inappropriate for a leftist to shout, all cops are bastards? In the most recent edition of Frankfurt University's AStA newspaper, an anonymous collective of authors from the queer feminist Antifa investigates this question, which is of great importance to regular protesters. Entitled Sexism in the Radical Left Movement, the piece begins by clarifying that, of course, police officers, and in particular their structures, constantly give legitimate reasons to insult them. But the authors believe that using the word bastard for this purpose is politically incorrect. Those who used this epithet for a hybrid were defenders of a racist and sexist ideology of purity, which stigmatized children conceived outside of wedlock, as well as children of heteroethnic couples. Of course, no self-respecting queer feminist leftist would like to refrain from the very necessary insulting of fascist police structures. What to do? Words like son of a bitch and slut are not suitable replacements for bastard, the authors write, since these were also terms that perpetuate bourgeois reactionary norms. How about pigs? On this count, the collective is silent, but we can surmise that the vegan Antifa faction would veto this proposal. Unacceptable denigration of non-human life forms. It seems like the only option is to refrain from insulting police officers. but such a bold thesis might appear in the Astor newspapers about as likely as an avowed queer feminist becoming president of the Frankfurt police. I thought you might enjoy that one.
Yeah. Thing is that I read it beforehand, and this one is written in a very simple language. I was able to understand most of it before, but I still don't understand what's the asterisk doing there. I mean, the Polizist acting in a Strukturen. What the fuck?
That's to make it. Which one are talking about? I think there's several ones.
Second, third paragraph. Third paragraph. Nu möchte aber auch der queer-feministische Linke nicht auf die notwendige Beleidigung war faschistische Polizist Asterisks innen Strukturen. What the fuck is that?
Yeah, that's the masculine plural form would be Polizisten.
Yes.
And the feminine plural form is Polizistinnen, and this is like one of these gender neutral ways of putting it, that you use the feminine form, but you put an asterisk before the innen to mark that that it also includes the male form, and the asterisk in particular is also that it also includes all the other, whatever, how many genders there are, that all the others are also included. There's also some other alternatives, like you could capitalize the I instead, or you could put an underscore before the I. All these are sort of politically correct options of using these gender neutral words, but yeah, they're all quite ugly.
I hope the author is being ironic here, and it's not the standard now for Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung to...
No, I mean that one, Polizistin, and that was a quote from the from these Antifa people.
Oh, okay. No, because I really would hate to see these kinds of mutilations becoming standard in such an outlet. Even like
that is also like in the second or like the second to last paragraph. There's Polizist asterisk Innenstrukturen.
That's the one I had in mind.
Oh, okay. That was the we meant. That is the author being facetious and using that in a humorous way.
Yeah. Still, I mean, also I would like to know what is a heteroethnische couple. What's a heteroethnic couple? Okay. Why do they just call it mixed race? I mean, why call it?
Because the word race is quite taboo in German. That's
okay.
Nazi terminology. That's you don't do that.
Yeah, well, the Nazis used to also use the word water. Is now that forbidden too?
Yeah. Did you know what the word that Hitler used most frequently was?
No.
It's der. The definite article in German.
Definite article. Yes.
Yeah, that's quite a Nazi word. That's.
Mm-hmm. And by the way,
stop using that all.
How do you say now in German? I mean, when I want to refer about the lying media, I would say die Lügenpresse, but I presume that's no longer acceptable. So how do you say the lying press now in German?
You don't say it. You don't say it. If you want
you don't say it. You just assume that the press never lies. Okay, so now that I have clarified the terms, I still don't understand why bastard is such a bad thing. I mean, Jesus was a bastard. So what? I mean, seriously, do these people even hear themselves?
Yeah, but I don't recall a lot of Christians calling Jesus such. But yeah,
sure they don't. But
yeah, technically you're correct. Yeah,
technically speaking, I mean, he was born out of wedlock and therefore was a bastard. Besides, why do they have to use a slogan in the English language? I mean, are they proper German Antifa, or were they more Antifa before it was cool? So shouldn't they be using a slogan in German rather than an English language one?
Yeah, like I actually haven't heard anyone actually shouting that sort of stuff, but I don't really go to these demonstrations where Antifa people might be, so I don't know.
Yeah,
But at least
I would just to videotape them and put them on YouTube.
Yeah, at least I see this sort of ACAB as a graffiti everywhere that everywhere I go, basically. So yeah, but it's like actually for a very long time I didn't actually know what ACAB was supposed to mean. I just some sort of abbreviation. I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of rapper or something. I don't know.
Well, I learned about it over 10 years ago. I mean, even while I knew many things about the commies, I didn't know this particular one. But I learned about it the hard way after I videotaped a march of the anti-fascists, which ended up with all of them in jail, which I enjoyed. Just saying. All right, let's go to the next one. There is an update on a previous story, isn't there?
Okay, we have covered this story about Gina-Lisa Lohfink in the past. Basically, for those who didn't listen to the past episodes, it's she's some sort of has-been celebrity who slept with two men, and they videotaped this incident sort of against their will, and then published the video. She then proceeded to accuse them of rape and of illegally publishing that video. These men were convicted for publishing that video and had to pay some sort of fine. But the rape allegation is completely bullshit. And like from the video, it's pretty obvious that it was not rape. However, there was like a massive like support from the media and lots of prominent people in favor of Lohfink, and even Manuel Schwesig, who is the federal minister against men, posted something on Twitter with the hashtag Team Gina-Lisa, and was this huge media brouhaha about this case, but then these men were acquitted, and then they sued Lohfink, and then she was convicted of falsely accusing them. And what's happened now is that there was a revision. She appealed the verdict, and this appeal has now been denied. And also, it's quite delightful how the judge laid into her, and she's basically finished now. There's no one supporting her anymore, and basically truth and justice have won. That's basically it.
Huge win. Huge win.
Huge win, exactly.
How long did this all take? Like, it was over 2 years, wasn't it? Something like that.
I don't actually quite recall. It's
because I remember the first time we talked about this was like in 2015. But I don't remember whether it was during
really
summer.
Was it so long ago? I don't think it was actually that long ago. I'm not sure on that.
Either it was in the summer or in the autumn of 2015. So 1 year and a half, something like that. Yeah, it's been quite a while. It's been quite a while. Nevertheless, it's still better than in Italy. Such a trial takes 4 years in Italy. So
yeah, I mean it's a completely two separate trials. Like the one was her rape accusation, and the second trial was the accusation against her of falsely accusing them of rape. That's two separate trials.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it's been a scandal that lasted quite a while.
Yep.
It's good to get some closure, and especially closure with good outcomes. I mean, sure, your privacy, blah blah blah, but really, rape, get the fuck out, get lost.
Yep.
All right, let's skip the country. Let's go to Norway. Oh boy, this one is a very, very politically incorrect article coming from site3.no. Women cost the state 113,000 kroner per year more than men. That's almost 13 €. Per year. This is the number which you will not see on Women's Day. An upcoming SSB report, which is cited in the new Brookmans report, brings up statistics which show that equality in Norway has a long way to go. The SSB stands for Statistics Sentralbyrå, or the Central Bureau of Statistics of Norway. The SSB has looked at how much men and women contribute to the public coffers compared with how much they get back throughout their lives. The Norwegian government finances are entirely dependent on oil revenues. No sex pulls its entire weight in this welfare society. Figures show that both women and men receive more benefits throughout their lives than they contribute, but that women are 6 times more expensive for the state than men. So how much do men and women cost? Men cost roughly 23,000 kroner per year throughout their lives. Women cost 136,000 kroner per year throughout their lives. The difference comes from both that women receive more services and benefits from the state, and partly because of the benefit related to children, but also the fact that most women contribute less to the state revenue. Two of the reasons for lower incomes from women is that overall 1 in 3 women in the labor force do not work full-time, and that fewer women than men are employed to begin with. 67.7% of women have over 15 years of working, whilst the figure is 73.4% among men. Men also pay for themselves during their adulthood time. The report also shows that after the state has provided school and education during childhood and adolescence, men are a plus for the state in adulthood, whilst women are still an expense. Men bring 54,000 kroner extra from the age of 25 till they retire. Women bring 99,000 kroner in losses per year from the age of 25 until they retire. So, you're not going to see that on Women's Day for sure. I'm going to use this article incessantly and relentlessly and ruthlessly against anyone who brings me Norway as an example of a paradise. No, it's not an example of a paradise. It's a society of parasites. Nobody pulls their own weight as they should. And when it comes to...
It's not nobody. It's just on average, they don't.
Well, it says here that no sex pulls its entire weight, but so there's that. I mean, most.
I mean, of course, there's still men and women who actually contribute more than they get paid, but there's just others who pull down the average.
Yeah, but overall,
yep.
They don't, and that's not. I mean, it can be sustainable as long as everyone else keeps buying oil from Norway. And as long as there's still a need for oil and there's still oil to begin with, which is sustainable for at least another 100 years from now. I mean, barring the dreams of the eco-Marxists and other green-obsessed individuals and freaks, but mostly freaks, but I would be repeating myself, barring the fiction that comes from the eco-Marxist corner of the society. You know, oil is here to stay. Oil-based economies are here to stay at least for another century. It's not going to change anytime soon.
I don't know about that. I would be very hesitant with the sort of predictions over 100 years, because you just don't have any idea what technology is going to look like in even 50 years from now. So to say that oil is going to be very important 100 years from now, I just think that's an irresponsible.
It will probably be less important
prophecy.
now. It's going to be less important than now, but it's still going to be good enough. Norway will probably still sell oil. Okay, I will not be alive 100 years from now, but I can pretty much be sure that I'll still be around 50 years from now. It's going to be still very, very important, even 50 years from now. And I'm quite willing to believe even more than that. Think about it this way. You know, I always keep saying this. My great-grandma learned at school that the oil will be done in 20 years. That was happening in the 1920s. And then, you know, her daughter, my grandma, also
yeah,
learned
I'm not saying because we're going to run out of oil in 50 years or something. I'm saying that maybe there'll be some sort of technology that means that oil is going to be a lot less important. Maybe there's some sort of new fuel that's more efficient. Maybe some sort of some of these.
Miracle, I see.
I'm not saying that there's going to be a miracle. Definitely, if you look over the development of the last 200 years or something, there's been lots of really huge disruptive changes in technology
Sure.
that
Sure.
that we couldn't have predicted in advance. And to
Hmm.
say that 100 years we're still going to use pretty much the same technologies as now, that's just uh,
Yeah.
it
Sure.
might be the case. We just don't know.
Sure. 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 There probably will be some sort of disruptive technology in the realm of fuel. In some ways, it still is. I mean, there are already prototypes of nuclear fueled cars and things like that, which may get better 50 years from now. So good that we could actually buy cars that have their small little nuclear reactor in their trunk. I mean, that could be possible, especially if radioactive material is made slightly safer than it is now. Uh, but nevertheless, oil will still be extracted from the ground because oil is not used just as a fuel. It's also used for a multitude of other products. And those products are very unlikely to be dropped off so fast because 50 years is still fast. uh, I mean, think about it this way: quote unquote clean technologies have been around since the 60s. They're still not the norm, globally speaking, even today. I mean, yeah, sure, they are the norm in some portions of Europe and some portions of the United States, but that's pretty much it. They're still not the norm, globally speaking.
Yeah. It's just I mean, if our primary source of fuel for cars and so on is going to change from oil to something else, then sure we're still going to use oil for producing plastics and whatnot, all sorts of other products that are made with the basis of oil. But
Yeah, but we'll consume a lot less. Yeah.
the demand will drop drastically, and therefore the price will also drop. And it's
Yeah,
so
and that's going to make it problematic for Norway.
yeah.
And
I
not
mean,
just Norway, other oil-based economies too, Saudi Arabia. So
don't get me wrong. I'm not predicting that oil is going to be worth a lot less in 100 years. Or what I'm saying is just we don't know what it's going to look like in 100 years. It could be radically different from the way that it looks today. Like just look at how different the world in 1917 looks to the world today,
yeah,
um, and
sure.
extrapolate that in the future. We just have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, even if
Like
it,
in 1917, most of Europe was still ruled by monarchies. Um, People still,
the Ottoman Empire
traveled
was still around, for crying out
on
loud.
horseback for a lot of the time. Um, you know, a lot of the things that we take for granted today just didn't exist back then, and
Mhm.
we have no reason to believe that this sort of rate of change will slow down.
Yeah, even if it keeps the same pace, it's still going to be quite radically different, even if we keep the same pace, which has been slowing down in the last decade, but still, it's still quite fast. And by the same pace, it could still be radically different. And mind you, progress is not to be taken for granted. We could go down. Different doesn't necessarily mean better.
Yeah,
But nevertheless, it just shows that the situation, the economic situation in pure terms, yes, Norway is a rich country, but it's not a rich country because its citizens are remarkably productive. It's a special case, basically. What happens in Norway cannot be necessarily reproduced, even in Sweden, which is almost identical culturally, but still economically radically different because Sweden doesn't have oil.
I mean it's sort of both. I mean the citizens of Norway are very productive, and on top of that they also have oil. Again, you look at lots of like countries in the Middle East that have lots of oil, but still have a much lower standard of living than Norway because their population is not very productive. Norway
No,
is in a special
I
situation
agree.
where
No,
you
I
have
agree. I was trying to compare within Europe
yeah,
rather
yeah,
than
we
with.
have this sort of um, very advanced capitalist economy as the basis, and on top of that, you also have lots of oil.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I was trying rather to compare within Europe rather
Yeah,
than with other cultures. So just comparing Norway with Sweden, almost barely different culturally speaking, but still radically different in terms of the way their economies work, solely because there is no oil in Sweden.
yeah.
and obviously, and also the incomes are just smaller in Sweden. Not significantly smaller, but smaller for sure, noticeably smaller. Even though on policy they rarely differ one from the other. Although to be fair, things are made mildly worse because of socialism. We have to remember in the 90s it was still acceptable. The prime minister of Sweden would say about Norway that Norway is the last Bolshevik state of Europe. so so yeah, I mean, Norway could be much better off if it would drop some of its socialism and some of its insane regulations, and probably also this gap of populations that get a lot more from the government than they contribute back in. Maybe this gap could also be addressed and the finances be a lot more balanced if you would leave people alone. Because let's not forget, the government of Norway is a very, very coercive and regulatory state. It's not a friendly place for capitalism.
No.
All right. Staying in Norway, holy shit, only 25 minutes left. Let's move faster. Coming from NRK, the law needs to be changed to allow male quotas, and it's just as bad as the headline says. The universities of Bergen and Oslo are struggling with the majority of women in their psychology programs, but refused to introduce quotas for men. But were refused, I should say. The article is, yeah. Anyway, it is obvious that there are too few men in psychology studies. One notices that in the dynamics of the faculty and are little affected by it, says Halvor Stavland. He sits in the reading room at the Faculty of Psychology at the University of Bergen, where he's studying psychology in the third year. Among students in the reading room, the vast majority are women. I think a more even gender distribution would be good. One might question whether character is the only thing that will determine if someone should be a psychologist, says Stavland. The gender imbalance in psychology studies has been an issue for many years. University of Bergen is around 80% women and 20% men in every section, according to the Faculty of Psychology. Last year, the University of Bergen and the University of Oslo researched the question of getting quotas for men in the psychology program, but recently received a refusal from the Ministry of Education. The universities wanted to implement a system where a minimum of 30% men in the student cohort would be ensured. In a circular from the ministry, it is made clear that such a quota scheme would be a breach of the equality law. It is not allowed to single out men to the same extent as one singles out women. When we got the equality law and gender equality started, there was a need to prioritize women, but we do believe that the Gender Equality Act today must provide equal opportunities for men and women, says Vice Rector Antonio Samdal at the University of Bergen. There is a need for psychologists of both sexes. Samdal says he wants the quotas because over time he has seen that the institution takes up way more women than men to study psychology. We want that for many. We know that for many individuals going to the psychologist, it is an important matter to have the ability to choose whether to go to a woman or a man. As such, we must also educate psychologists of both sexes, says Dean Jarle Eid at the Faculty of Psychology. Also, the university's psychology program is dominated by women. They tried several measures to get more men into the study, but with no luck. We understand the decision of the Ministry of Education, but it does prevent us from doing something with what we feel is a problem, added Dean Paul Kraft at the university. A proposal for a new gender equality bill is planned to be presented during 2017. It is good that there is an ongoing process of updating the law. We believe and hope that it will allow for quotas for men, added Vice Rector Samdal. When the NRK tried to get in contact with the Ministry of Children and Equality, they refused to comment on the matter. So, we have a bad system, let's make it worse. Yeah, same thing. Why is it a problem that 80% of the students are women? So fucking what?
Yeah, I mean, if it is indeed the case that some people prefer to have psychologists of a particular gender, and it might turn out that male psychologists get more customers if they're like independent, or they're more likely to be hired by some sort of clinic or whatever. then that's fine. That they can do that, but it doesn't mean that we have to stop women from studying psychology.
Yes. And also, if that is indeed the case, which may indeed be the case, I mean, I know someone who does prefer to speak to a therapist of the same sex, and there are probably many people like that. But if that is indeed the case, and it's a widespread problem, which is not really a problem, the market could fix it. I mean, that means male psychologists will get a lot more customers and could actually even increase their rate, uh, the fee that they charge, whether they charge it through an insurance or upfront. I don't know. I don't care. And over time, there will be much more of an economic incentive for younger men to say, "Oh, look, I know that guy who is a psychologist, and he makes a lot of money, and I want to make a lot of money too." And incentives would solve this issue within 5 years without any quota and without a. If it is indeed an issue, I don't know if it is, but let's assume it is. It would be better for it to be fixed by the market rather than quotas.
Yep.
Mind
like
you,
who's to say that 30% is the right ratio? I mean, I don't know. These people probably.
Yeah, why 30%? Why not 35? Why not 60? I don't know. Who can know that? The market tends to know these things a lot better than politicians and deans of faculties. I mean, older listeners might know that we've made the exact same points when there was a talk about female quotas in mathematics or whatever. It's the same thing. It's just not the way things should be done. And if the law doesn't allow this now, okay, but the law shouldn't have allowed singling out women either. I mean, it's a bad system, and these guys are proposing to make it even worse.
Yep.
All right, let's go to the next one. The next one is from the silly place. Coming from Sweden, but it's written in the Daily Mail. Swedish councillor proposes 1 hour paid sex breaks to improve workers' happiness. Swedes should be allowed to take an hour-long paid break from work to go home and have sex with their partners, according to a councillor. Per-Erik Muskus, a 42-year-old city official, it's not really a city, for the northern town of Övertorneå, has presented the motion, which is aimed at improving people's personal relationships. He said couples were not spending enough time with each other in today's society, so proposed workers were given time off during the day to get intimate with their lovers. Muskus said, quote, "There are studies that show sex is healthy. It's about having better relationships." Although he made a point of saying there was no way to verify workers would take the opportunity to hop back into bed, the councillor believes employees need to be trusted with their free hour. You can't guarantee that a worker doesn't go out for a walk instead. Muskus said he saw no reason why the motion wouldn't pass. After the Finns and the French, Swedish full-time employees worked the least in Europe, with only 1,685 hours on average in 2015, according to a study by Economic Research Institute COAX code. Brits worked an average of 1,900 hours and Germans 1,847. First of all, it's not a city. I mean, Övertorneå is a border village that has 1917 inhabitants. I mean, less than 2,000 inhabitants. So there's that. I mean, and the total surface of the village is like 2.5 square kilometers. So I can definitely believe that workers in Övertorneå do have legitimately time in 1 hour to go home, have sex, and get back to work. It makes sense for such a huge metropolis. But I'm pretty sure that workers in Stockholm wouldn't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea why this made international headlines. I mean, it's everywhere. It's on Quartz. It's on some affiliated website of the New York Times, a former newspaper. It's in France 24. I've seen it in the Hungarian media. I've seen it. I mean, really?
Well, there is a solution. Start putting your whores in vending machines in the break room.
Sort of a glory hole type of arrangement.
You know, you put in your 2 quarters or whatever the currency is. The whore falls out. There you go.
Yeah, but then again, in Sweden, this kind of activity is illegal.
Oh, well, you know.
No, it would be illegal to put up these vending machines. Would just be illegal to use them. That's the whole Swedish.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you could just
Yeah, fair enough.
stock them with all the whores you want. You know.
Still, I have no idea why this ended up being international news. Meanwhile, the feminists, of course, are very pissed of it. The extremist Swedish blog Lady Dahmer published an op-ed 2 days ago announcing how pissed it is that and how misogynistic the authorities in Övertorneå are. And most of the comments were like, do you guys realize that your company has more employees than this village has people? I mean, you're literally ranting at someone smaller than you, physically smaller. Amazing. Okay, 15 more minutes, enough for the last one, which is from the very silly place.
Okay, the next one is from care2.com. Where are all the feminists in Germany? Earlier this week, on one of the biggest broadcast networks in Germany, a panel of men gathered on TV to discuss Chancellor Angela Merkel's physical appearance and whether or not she is even recognizable as a woman. Even more disturbing than a televised all-male debate on the appearance of possibly the most powerful woman in the world is that no one seems to care. About 20 minutes into an hour-long segment, host Markus Lanz asked political advisor Michael Spreng how he would advise Angela Merkel, quote-unquote, optically. He said women in politics change so much visually that, quote, you do not even recognize them as women anymore. Spreng responded that he could not confirm that now. Lanz shot back. That's what women in politics say. Of course she's a woman, said Spreng, visibly flustered, and many women feel represented by her. The conversation dissolved into sickening comparisons of female politicians based on their appearance, perceived femininity, and emotionality. One comment during the US election demanding Clinton smile more launched 1,000 think pieces, but 2 days after the segment aired, there's silence in German media. 2 brief articles exist about the sexist discussion and nothing more. So now I have to ask, German feminists, where are you hiding? In the 2 years I've lived in Germany, I've repeatedly heard what a great country this is for women. One fellow immigrant called Germany a paradise for women. And while there are incredible laws in place for women here, one look at the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report, where Germany ranks 14th and even number 1 isn't perfect, will tell you this isn't true. There is no paradise for women. Germany ranks 24th in the world for women in parliament and 95th for gender wage equality. And yet women here lack the outrage and activism that successfully guides American feminism. Any mention of Alice Schwarzer, the Gloria Steinem of Germany, is promptly met with a groan and a roll of the eye. German women apparently are tired of her spiel and would like to get on with earning significantly less than men. Thank you very much. And it's not just a wage gap or lack of representation in government, in spite of Merkel, that should have German women up in arms. The battlefront on which American feminists have historically waged their wars are deserted here, save for a few straggling soldiers. Birth control here is not free, except for young women, and women here think that's perfectly reasonable. Abortion is technically illegal, except in cases of rape or danger to the woman's health, but can be obtained if the woman receives pregnancy support counseling and explains why she wants to have an abortion. She'll receive a certificate from a counselor and must take this to a doctor not associated with the center where she was counseled after a 3-day waiting period. This counseling exception is only applicable to up to 12 weeks, after which all abortions are illegal. Until last year, lack of consent was not enough for to constitute rape in the eyes of German law. Instead, a woman had to physically fight back against her attacker for an assault to be considered rape, which is not true, but whatever. It's no surprise that 95% of rapes in Germany go unreported, which you totally made up just right now. Women are seriously underrepresented at the executive levels of business, and the efforts to correct this have been met with disdain and anger, or not just met at all. In January 2016, a law went into effect requiring 30% of seats on boards to go to women, and yet a month later, the number held at 22%. Of course, none of this even begins to describe the individual lived experiences of women across the country, the street harassment, the sexist comments, and the heavy reliance on outdated stereotypes. All of these laws, policies, and practices contribute to a culture which, while equal at first glance, is rife with sexism just below the surface. If you can't trust German women to make their own medical decisions without counseling, why would we expect them to lead executive boards? And if we have no issue seriously debating the appearance of the most powerful woman in the country, why would anyone believe women are worth more than their looks? There's a world of improvement to be made in Germany, but the women here have to be willing to fight for it.
All right. Is there anything in this article that is not fake news?
I mean, it's
I presume the 22% with the women on boards. I think that's true. I remember reading.
yeah, I
it.
mean, so most of the things that she mentions here are like not factually false. They're just like very misleading. Like, yeah, it is true that technically abortion is illegal in Germany. It's just that you won't be punished for performing an abortion or for having an abortion. Like it's that's basically the sort of compromise solution that was arrived at. That yeah, it's technically illegal. It's not like the cost of having an abortion is not covered by health insurance, but they can still get an abortion.
Yeah, and the compromise in question is not exactly unheard of. I mean, that's pretty much the norm almost all of Europe, except for Poland, Ireland, and Malta, where there is none. But everywhere else, there is some sort of this kind of thing. Same thing is in Britain. Same thing is in Italy. It is not particularly unheard of. And again, on this abortion issue, I love it when I hear American leftists saying, "Oh, we want to make our country, meaning the United States, more like Europe." And I'm like, "Okay, what country of Europe would you like to be more like?" And they're like, "Well, like Denmark." And I'm like, "Okay, how about the American corporate tax goes back to 18%?" And they're like, "That's too small." Well, that's the Danish uh, corporate tax. How about make abortions illegal in the United States after 12 weeks? And they're like, "Oh, that's too small of a limit." Well, that's a limit in Denmark and in Germany, for that matter. I mean, they want to be more like Europe, but then they find out that in Europe, on most things that American leftists think are important, in Europe there are a lot more sensible solutions that societies have reached to over the course of the decades. It was never the case that you had a Supreme Court that was simply hand down quote unquote policy, and then everyone had to follow. No debate, no nothing.
Because something 14th Amendment, something mumble. Therefore, abortion.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And this is the classical case of American leftists coming to Europe and realizing that most of the things that they thought they knew about Europe is just not true. Or in this case, Germany in particular. But then again, the things that she's whining about are pretty much the norm in Europe. Here, for instance, I wanted to include in this news section, but then I realized that we wouldn't be having time, and thank goodness I was right. There was a case of a guy who was beaten by a police officer, a female police officer, because he told her that she looks like some politician that we don't really like. And making fun of politicians or discussing their looks, whether they're men or women, but particularly if they're women, it's pretty much the norm, and nobody's outraged about it most of the time. Welcome to Europe. We just don't have this extreme outrage culture the way American leftists have built for themselves.
Yeah, and I mean this particular thing that she leads with this discussion of that Merkel doesn't really look like a woman or something like that. It was sort of an awkward comment, and you could see that the people on the panel were like uncomfortable with that question. it was just like an awkward moment, but it did not justify some sort of giant outcry of lots of news outlets, because this was a really minor thing. And as you said, like two pieces were published about that criticized this thing, but it was just like a blip on the radar. It's just unimportant, and it's just
because it was unimportant.
yeah.
Yeah, but she compares it with the US, where there was a huge brouhaha because someone told Clinton that she should smile a lot more.
Like it seems like even the feminists can be somewhat reasonable here in Europe. It's just
Yeah.
a lot of the times I would like there are many things I appreciate about America, but some things are also just plain insane over there. It's just
Yeah.
it's just
The outrage culture for sure is a problem, which
Yeah.
is why I tend to like very controversial figures who just go in and say, you know what, fuck you, fuck all of you, you're insane. That's why I tend to like these kinds of figures, because the outrage culture just needs to die.
Yep.
It's just getting an annoying. It's becoming an annoyance. And seriously, she complains that any mention of Alice Schwarzer is promptly met with groan and rolls of the eye. Well, maybe because Alice Schwarzer, at least from a legal standpoint, is a criminal. Just saying.
Yeah, and
that might play into it, maybe.
Yeah. And she's like this old woman, this grumpy old dinosaur that even the younger feminists don't like her. It's
I don't blame them. Seriously, I don't blame it. I don't blame them. I've seen some recent interviews subtitled. Someone was very nice to subtitle some recent interviews with Alice Schwarzer, and I'm like, no wonder nobody likes her. I mean, really? She's just annoying. But
yeah, she's just like a really nasty person. Is also them like it seems that in her personal life she's sort of abusive and just overall just a terrible human being. And
yes. Yeah, and what a surprise! Most people tend to not like that.
Yeah.
Especially when it continues over decades. I mean, again, it's not like everyone discovered that she's nasty yesterday. It's been an ongoing feature for decades.
Yeah, we figured out by now that she's quite a nasty woman.
Yeah. Also, what else is she? Oh, yeah, birth control is not free. Was there a ban on birth control in Germany and I missed it? I mean, I seem to forget reading that particular news story. When did that happen?
It's just like that's just saying like there's a ban on food because food is not free or something like that. It's insane.
Yeah, food is not free either. Oh my God, Germany already sounds horrible. On a
You
more
actually
serious,
have to pay money to just physically stay alive, not starve. It's barbaric.
It's barbaric, indeed. I mean, compared to Venezuela, where you don't have to pay money. Oh wait, there is no food in Venezuela. Oh well, never mind. But at least it's guaranteed by the state, so that's progressive. On a more serious note, again, this is the classical case of a radical American leftist coming over here, anywhere in Europe really, and realizing that most of the things that they thought about Europe are either not true, or if they're true, they're not really that the way they imagined them. And again, I don't remember in any European country ever being a discussion about making birth control free. I don't think this was ever a topic here, even amongst feminists. I mean, not even Swedish feminists think that birth control should be covered by the state. And usually the Swedish feminists are the first ones to believe insane things. But not this one. I mean, in this particular case, the American feminists are a lot more progressive, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like in American discussions of Europe, there's just a lot of very uninformed people, like on all sides of the political spectrum. That's something I've definitely noticed, that this sort of stereotype of the American who just has no idea about the rest of the world is at least partially true. At least as sort of a generally useful generalization. That's
Yes, and or when they do provide something, they usually refer to the United Kingdom and they say, "Oh, in the rest of Europe." Well, that's not
Yeah,
exactly true.
they sort of assume that it's that the United Kingdom is just representative of the rest of Europe, more or less, which is just
Which is entirely false. I mean, we have
yeah,
entirely different legal traditions on the
it's
continent.
a very
versus-
atypical European country.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, Germany or Poland are a lot more typical European
Yep.
countries than the United Kingdom. Yes, but yeah, I mean, this whole article is just stunning, but still representative of a future movie. I mean, sometime in the future there will have to be made a movie. A leftist visits Europe, and made by Hollywood or something, and then presented to the American public.
Yeah, it just seems like both the American left and the American right have some sort of very cartoonish version of Europe, where the right just thinks it's this sort of socialist hellhole, which is
Which it
overrun
kind of is.
by hordes of refugees who are just
Yeah, that's in Sweden.
rioting in the streets all the time. And yeah, it's also in Germany, as I've been told by various right-wing people in America, which
No,
somehow
not really.
I've missed these marauding hordes. Maybe they're not around where I live, but yeah, and on the left, it's a sort of it's instead of being a socialist hellhole, it's a
Socialist paradise.
socialist utopia. It's and both are just completely false.
Yeah, again, Sweden is not representative for all of Europe. The United Kingdom is not representative for all of Europe. Seriously, people, start reading. With that being said, we already 1 minute over time, so I guess I'm out of things to say.
Okay, very quickly, take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheers!